They told her to wait. Then they told her it was too late, but what they never knew was that the quiet man holding her hand wasn't just a grieving husband, he was an FBI special agent whose next phone call would expose a truth so horrifying it would shake an entire hospital system to its core. Stay with this story till the end, because what begins as silent prejudice becomes a reckoning no one saw coming, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, exposed, and never repeated, subscribe now and stand with voices that refuse to be buried. The night Alana Brooks walked into Westbridge Medical Center, the rain was falling in thin silver needles and her contractions were already too close together for comfort, her hands trembling as she clutched her swollen belly and leaned against the cold intake counter while her husband Marcus filled out the paperwork with the calm precision of a man trained to never show panic, though inside his chest every instinct was screaming that something was wrong, not just with the pain she was in but with the way the nurse barely looked at her, the way the clipboard was pushed back instead of pulled closer, the way the words, "Have a seat and wait," were delivered without urgency despite the sweat soaking Alana's hairline and the sharp gasp she couldn't hold back when another contraction tore through her body. And Marcus noticed everything because noticing was his job even when he didn't announce it, especially when he didn't announce it, and as they were ushered into the waiting area instead of triage, he gently asked if someone could check her vitals again because she was high risk, because her blood pressure had been unstable all week, because her doctor had warned them about preeclampsia. But the nurse waved him off with a thin smile that never reached her eyes and said labor takes time and there were others ahead of them, and Alana tried to be brave, tried to breathe through the pain the way the birthing classes had taught her, but something felt wrong deep in her chest, like a pressure building behind her ribs, like her body was sounding an alarm no one wanted to hear, and when nearly 40 minutes passed before a young resident finally glanced at her chart and frowned, Marcus stood up again and insisted that she be seen immediately, his voice still polite but now edged with steel, only for the resident to shrug and say the attending physician would decide, and that physician, Dr. Harold Whitman, arrived with a clipped step and an air of practiced indifference, flipping through the chart with a sigh as if already annoyed, asking Alana questions without looking at her face, addressing Marcus like an inconvenience rather than a partner, and when Marcus mentioned the word, preeclampsia, again, Whitman scoffed and muttered something about internet diagnoses and dramatic patients, ordering pain medication but delaying blood work, delaying monitoring, delaying the one intervention that could have changed everything, and hours blurred together in a haze of fluorescent lights and whispered pleas as Alana's condition worsened, her vision blurring, her speech slurring, her hands swelling until her rings cut into her skin, and still they waited, still they were told to be patient, still they were treated like they were exaggerating, until suddenly Alana screamed, not from contraction pain but from something deeper, something terrifying, clutching her chest as her body convulsed, and only then did the room erupt into motion, alarms shrieking, nurses rushing, Whitman barking orders too late, and Marcus holding Alana's hand as her grip weakened, whispering that he was there, that she wasn't alone, that she had to fight, but within minutes her heartbeat faltered, then stopped, and despite frantic efforts, despite rushed apologies that came only after the realization that a fatal mistake had been made, Alana Brooks was pronounced dead just after midnight along with the unborn child she had carried for 8 months. And the silence that followed was heavier than any sound Marcus had ever known, heavier even than the silence of interrogation rooms or crime scenes, because this silence was personal, and when Whitman offered a stiff explanation filled with medical jargon and excuses about unpredictability, Marcus said nothing, he simply nodded, thanked them quietly, and walked out of the hospital into the rain, where he sat in his car for exactly 3 minutes before pulling out his phone and making a call that would change everything, because Marcus Brooks was not just a grieving husband. He was a senior FBI agent assigned to civil rights violations, and the case he opened that night was not fueled by revenge but by truth, by evidence, by the patterns he had already begun to recognize even before Alana died, patterns that showed black women at Westbridge were 3 times more likely to have delayed care, more likely to have their pain minimized, more likely to suffer complications brushed aside as exaggeration, and over the following weeks, while the hospital released a bland statement calling the death unfortunate but unavoidable, federal investigators quietly pulled surveillance footage, internal emails, patient records, and whistleblower testimonies from nurses who had tried to speak up before and been silenced, and what they uncovered painted a damning picture of systemic bias led by Dr. Whitman himself, a man whose private messages referred to certain patients as overreactors, whose treatment notes consistently downplayed symptoms in black women, whose decisions had led not just to Alana's death but to a trail of near misses and tragedies buried under paperwork. And when the indictment finally came, it was swift and public, charging Whitman with criminal negligence, civil rights violations, and falsification of medical records, and the hospital administrators who had ignored complaints found themselves facing federal scrutiny as well. While Marcus stood at a press conference not as an agent but as a husband, his voice steady as he spoke Alana's name and told her story, making it impossible to look away, impossible to deny that what happened was not an accident but a consequence of prejudice allowed to fester behind white coats and closed doors, and as reforms were mandated, licenses revoked, and training overhauled, Marcus returned home each night to a quiet house filled with memories of laughter, baby clothes still folded in drawers, dreams that would never be realized, and though justice could not bring Alana back, it ensured that her death would not be dismissed, not forgotten, not repeated, because her life mattered, her voice mattered, and through the pain, Marcus transformed grief into accountability, turning one devastating loss into a catalyst that forced an entire system to confront its darkest truths, proving that ignorance thrives in silence but collapses when the truth is spoken aloud.